They called her the terrorist's daughter, right there in front of the whole class. She was holding her lunch tray. The moment the words hit, the room got quieter than a funeral. That's the first memory she has of Jefferson High. Not the welcome banner. Not the counselor saying, "Let us know if you need anything." Just that voice. Loud, confident, cruel. And everyone laughed. Her name was Layla Bennett. She was 16. Her dad was an American soldier. He fell on his final mission near the Iran-Israel border. They didn't know her name, but they thought they knew her story. They thought her dad was a monster because he fell in a war their parents only understood through headlines. They didn't know what kind of man he actually was. What kind of father? What kind of soldier? And she didn't tell them. Not that day. She went home, locked her bedroom door, and opened the wooden box he left her before his last deployment. Inside was the letter, still sealed. She'd been too afraid to read it until then. But that night, she unfolded it, and something changed. He wrote, "If you ever feel ashamed of where you come from, remember, your story doesn't end where others stop understanding it." That's when she decided. She wasn't going to fight back with fists or anger. She'd fight back with the truth. They thought they could define her with a headline, but they had no idea what kind of legacy they were laughing at. And in 5 days, they'd hear his story from her voice, from Layla Bennett. But what they didn't know was that she had a voice. And this is her story, told in her own words. I didn't sleep that night. The letter sat on my desk, its envelope half torn. The handwriting on the front still steady, bold. To Layla, open only when you need to remember who you are. I'd always thought that meant sometime far in the future, like graduation, or maybe my wedding day. Not whatever this was. That morning, I skipped breakfast. My mom had already left for her shift at the hospital. She'd been taking double shifts all week. I knew it wasn't just for money. It was her way of staying distracted. From everything. From the people whispering at church. From the news reports still calling it a tragic loss during a controversial operation. From the empty chair at the dinner table. I packed the letter into my bag, just in case. A part of me wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet. At school, things didn't get better. They got quieter. And somehow that was worse. No one said anything to my face. But the way they looked at me, like I was something between a stray dog and a bomb they didn't want to trigger, it was unbearable. Even the teachers didn't know how to act. Mr. Reynolds, my history teacher, paused awkwardly during a lesson on the Middle East, then said, "Some students may have personal connections, so let's just move on." No one looked at me, but I felt it. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about high school bullying. This was about identity, legacy, silence. I needed to speak, not for attention, but because if I didn't, someone else was going to write my father's story for me, and they were already doing a terrible job. That's when I remembered something he used to say when I was little. If someone hands you the wrong name, don't wear it. Hand it back. And that's exactly what I was going to do. I started spending my lunch breaks in the library. The librarian, Miss Carter, didn't ask questions. She just let me be. I sat in the back corner, the quietest spot, next to a window that looked out over the football field. The same field where Tyler Hensley, the guy who'd called me the terrorist's daughter, was now joking with his friends like nothing had happened. My cousin Daniel had transferred to Jefferson High last year. We weren't close, not since the funeral, but we shared blood and history. I opened my laptop. I typed in my father's name, Captain Aaron Michael Bennett. The first few results were expected. Military memorial pages, an obituary, an article about the controversial joint mission. But then I saw something else. A link to a defense journal, unclassified humanitarian actions during border conflicts. Buried in the middle of the article, there it was. One notable example occurred in 2022, when Captain Aaron M. Bennett, during an active engagement zone near the Iran border, led the emergency evacuation of 12 children from a collapsed school building under enemy fire. Captain Bennett was fatally wounded in the process. 12 children, not enemy combatants, not soldiers, children. And I sat there, frozen. Why wasn't that in the headlines? Why was that not what anyone talked about? That night, I showed the article to my mom. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at the screen for a long time, then finally whispered, "He told me not to tell you. He didn't want you to carry that weight. But you deserve to know." She got up, walked to her bedroom, and came back holding something wrapped in a folded American flag. It was his medal, one I'd never seen before, awarded posthumously, for bravery under fire. She handed it to me without a word, and I finally understood. He didn't just die. He chose to put himself between danger and the innocent. That's what I would tell them. At school, they had this annual tradition, Hero Week. Every student had to pick someone to research and give a short speech about. Past years were full of the usual suspects: Martin Luther King Jr., Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Neil Armstrong, Harriet Tubman. But this time, I wrote down my choice in capital letters. Captain Aaron M. Bennett. Ms. Carter looked up when she saw it. She didn't smile. She just nodded, like she already knew this was more than just a school project. That weekend, I sat down and started writing my speech. But the words wouldn't come, so I opened his letter again. And I copied the last line onto the first slide of my presentation. You are not who they say you are. You are who I raised you to be. I didn't know yet what would happen on that stage, but I knew this much. In 5 days, they would stop calling me that girl. They'd know my name. Day one, I stood in front of my mirror with my note cards and tried to speak. Nothing came out. My voice was somewhere between my chest and my throat, stuck like a knot. I stared at my reflection, hair tied back, posture straight, eyes unsure. This wasn't just a school assignment. This was the moment I would walk into every room afterward, either known or reduced. The choice was mine. Day two, I brought my dad's medal to school, kept it in my backpack, wrapped in one of his old undershirts. I didn't tell anyone. I just needed it close, like an anchor, like armor. Tyler Hensley bumped into me in the hallway. He didn't say sorry, didn't even look at me, just laughed under his breath and walked away with his group. Part of me wanted to scream, to shout, "You don't know anything about me," or about him, but I didn't, because soon I wouldn't have to. Day three, I asked Ms. Carter if I could reserve the media room during lunch. She raised an eyebrow. Project? I nodded. Something more than a slideshow, then? I nodded again, and for the first time in weeks, I saw her smile. Good, she said. Make them see. I spent the whole afternoon writing and deleting. I tried different tones: angry, brave, factual. None felt right. Ms. Carter's words echoed. Make them see. But how? Then I remembered. Truth needs no filter. That night, I found the only video footage that existed. A grainy helmet cam recording from a fellow soldier, leaked to a small independent news site. No blood, no violence, just my dad, covered in dust, carrying a little boy in his arms through smoke. He was shouting to someone, but the audio was garbled. Then, he looked straight at the camera for a second and smiled. Not because it was over, but because the boy was alive. I watched it 5 times, then 10. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I was preparing. Day 4. The student list went up outside the auditorium. Layla Bennett, Friday, 2:10 p.m., right after Tyler Hensley. Of course, I heard him joking with his friends later that day. Better not fall asleep during Bennett's speech, or she'll call in a drone strike. They laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. But I just looked at him and smiled. He didn't know what was coming. Day 5. The seats were packed. Juniors, seniors, a few teachers, the principal, even some parents. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm, hushed, heavy, expectant. Tyler went first. His hero was a YouTuber who did parkour and had 3 million followers. He made a couple of jokes, showed a flashy video, and bowed like he was accepting an Oscar. A few claps. Some scattered laughter. Then my name was called. I walked up slowly. No slides yet. Just me and the microphone. Hi, I said. My voice cracked slightly. I took a breath. Looked up. My name is Layla Bennett, and I'd like to tell you about a man most of you have never heard of, but who saved 12 lives, including someone you may know. That got their attention. I clicked the remote. Slide 1. A blurry military photo. My dad in uniform, kneeling beside children, smiling wide. Slide 2. The medal. The official citation. The article from the Defense Journal. Slide 3. The helmet cam footage. I didn't speak over the video. I let it play, uncut, raw. The room fell completely silent. When the clip ended, I stepped back up. That was my father, Captain Aaron Bennett. He fell during a joint humanitarian mission between U.S. and Israeli forces near the Iran border. The children he saved? Most of them survived. One of them is my cousin, Daniel Levy. His family moved to this town 2 years ago. There was a gasp. I turned to look and saw him. Daniel, front row, eyes wide. Mouth open. He stood slowly, voice shaking. She's telling the truth. He carried me out. I was 7. My leg was broken. I would have died. He sat back down. I looked back at the crowd. And still, someone in this room thought it was funny to call me the terrorist's daughter. Now the silence was thick, like it had weight. I'm not here for your apology, I said, voice steady now. I'm here to make sure no one else's story gets erased because someone else was too ignorant to ask. Final slide, a quote from the letter. You are not who they say you are. You are who I raised you to be. I closed my laptop. No applause. Not yet. And then, one hand clapped, then another. Then the whole room stood up, except for Tyler. He didn't move. And in that moment, I didn't feel like the daughter of a dead man. I felt like someone who had just taken back everything they tried to take from me. When I walked off that stage, I didn't feel proud. I felt emptied, like I had just poured every part of myself into that room. Grief, shame, memory, pride, and now there was nothing left but a quiet kind of ache. MS. Carter met me at the edge of the curtain. She didn't say a word. She just put her hand gently on my shoulder. I didn't realize how badly I needed that until it happened. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Students moved through the halls like something had shifted, like the gravity of the building had changed and everyone was still trying to walk straight. Some made eye contact. Most didn't. No one said anything cruel. But kindness is its own kind of silence sometimes, especially when it comes late. When the final bell rang, I walked home instead of taking the bus. I needed the air. I needed the space to let it all sink in, the weight of it, the release. At the front door, I paused. Through the window, I saw my mom in the kitchen, standing still, holding her phone. Her face was unreadable. I walked in slowly. She looked up, and her eyes were already wet. I got a message, she said, her voice shaky. From Daniel's mother. She was watching the live stream. I blinked out. I noticed a teacher setting up a small camera on a tripod. I thought it was for archive footage or class use. I didn't think anyone beyond these walls would see it. They live-streamed Hero Week? She nodded. Apparently one of the teachers set it up for the parents. My mom walked over and held my face in both hands. I'm proud of you, she said softly. Your father would be too. I broke then, right there in the living room. Not the silent tears of grief I had grown used to, but the kind of tears that came when something old finally broke open and something new could begin. That weekend, everything changed. The school sent out an official apology to our family. They invited my mom to speak at the Veterans Day Assembly. The principal even asked if they could include Captain Bennett's name on the Wall of Honor in the main hallway, the one reserved for former students who had gone on to serve. But what struck me most was what happened Monday morning. Tyler Hensley stood at my locker. He looked uncomfortable. No friends around this time. He held a folded piece of paper. I didn't reach for it. He spoke first. I didn't know, he said, eyes locked on the floor. About your dad. About any of it. I raised an eyebrow. And you thought not knowing gave you the right to call me what you did. His face turned red. No, I guess I thought I was being funny. I didn't think it mattered. That sentence stayed with me. I didn't think it mattered. I took the paper from his hand, opened it. It was a letter, badly written, barely punctuated, but clearly sincere. It ended with, I'm sorry. I won't blame you if you don't forgive me. I looked at him. I don't need you to feel guilty, I said. I just need you to do better. To be better. He nodded and walked away. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. Because what started as one speech in a high school auditorium soon rippled far beyond it. The video of my presentation had been shared online, first by students, then by veterans groups, then by journalists. Within a week, it hit 2 million views. People from all over the country, even a few from abroad, started commenting. Some had lost family in the same war. Some admitted they judged people like me without knowing why. Some just said thank you. And me? I started to feel something I hadn't felt since before he left. Not like a daughter without a father, but like a daughter carrying on what he stood for. One night. About 2 weeks later, I sat with my mom in the living room again. She was scrolling through comments on the video. Her favorite one was from a woman in Nebraska. I showed this to my son. He's 12. He asked me what it means to be brave. And I said, That's what it means. My mom smiled softly. You're not just telling his story anymore, she said. You're helping other people understand theirs. That's when I realized. Maybe my dad's legacy wasn't just about medals and missions. Maybe it was about giving people permission to stop hiding from their grief, their guilt, or the names others tried to give them. Maybe it was about remembering that silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it means gathering strength. And when the time comes, when the story needs to be told, silence can become something else entirely. A voice, one loud enough to reach even the people who never wanted to listen. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Subject line, Veterans Legacy Memorial Keynote Invitation. I almost deleted it. It looked official. Too official. Like something sent by mistake. But then I saw the body of the message. Dear Miss Bennett, on behalf of the National Veterans Legacy Foundation, we would be honored if you would join us as the keynote speaker at this year's memorial in Washington, D.C., to share your father's story and your own. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I called my mom. Her voice was calm, but I could hear it, that soft catch in her throat she always had when something big was about to change. Only if you want to, she said. You don't owe anyone anything. But something in me whispered otherwise. Maybe I didn't know them, but I owed him. So I said yes. The flight to D.C. was quiet. My mom held my hand during takeoff, the same way she used to when I was little. We arrived the night before the event. They had booked us a room at a quiet hotel not far from the Lincoln Memorial. Everything smelled like cedar and fresh linen. Everything felt too clean for what I was carrying inside. The next morning, I dressed slowly. Black dress. No jewelry. Just the metal. Pinned to my chest, over my heart. The event was held at the National Mall. Rows of chairs. Flags waving gently in the breeze. Families sitting together. Some holding framed photos. Some holding hands. Some just holding their breath. I was the youngest speaker on the list. Everyone else was a general, a senator, a historian. I was the daughter, and when my name was called, I almost didn't move. Then I felt my mom's hand on my back. Go, she whispered. He's listening. I walked up to the podium. The lights were soft. The crowd quiet. The microphone buzzed lightly. I took a breath. My name is Layla Bennett, I began. I'm 16 years old. My father, Captain Aaron M. Bennett, fell in the Iran-Israel border mission 3 years ago. Pause. That's what the record says. Pause again. But records don't always tell the whole story. And headlines don't always tell the truth. I told them about the 12 children, about the smoke, about the smile. I told them about the letter, about the box, about being called something I wasn't over and over again. I told them what it meant to carry grief in silence, and what it took to turn that silence into something useful. I'm not here today just because my father was brave, I said. I'm here because someone tried to erase him, and I didn't let them. Then I looked out over the crowd, and I said, if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't need a battlefield to be at war. Sometimes the loudest battles happen inside you. And sometimes the quietest people are the ones carrying the heaviest stories. When I stepped away from the microphone, the applause wasn't loud. It was steady and real. A woman in the front row, maybe in her 70s, stood and saluted. Others followed. One by one. No one cheered. They honored. Later that day, a man approached me. Clean-shaven, suit. I was too tired for his age. I served with your father, he said. I froze. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photo, faded, folded, fragile. It showed 4 soldiers sitting on a dirt road. My dad was in the middle, laughing. His hand was on the shoulder of the man standing in front of me now. He saved my life, he said. Twice. But he never talked about it. Said we all had our part to play. I held the photo like it was glass. Then he added, softly, he would have been proud of the part you're playing. That night, back at the hotel, I sat on the windowsill, looking out at the city lights. My mom was asleep. I opened my phone. The foundation had posted my speech. Already thousands of views, hundreds of comments. But I didn't scroll. I didn't refresh. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't need to see what anyone else thought. Because I already knew who I was. And I knew who he had been. He was more than his uniform. He was the reason I still believed in decency. But more than that, he was a father who left behind more than grief. He left behind a voice. And somehow, that voice had become mine. I returned to Jefferson High 2 days later. Same school, same lockers, same hallways. But something had shifted. People didn't avoid my eyes anymore. They didn't stare either. They nodded. Small gestures, but after what I lived through, they felt like full conversations. Even Tyler Hensley gave a slight wave one morning in homeroom. Not dramatic, just human, and that was enough. But the biggest change wasn't in them. It was in me. I no longer carried the letter in my backpack like a lifeline. I no longer waited for someone to bring up my father's name just to brace myself. For the first time in a long time, I could speak about him without my voice shaking. Not because I was over it, but because I had finally allowed myself to grow through it. A week after we got back from DC, I found the envelope tucked under the lining of the wooden box. It had slid behind the felt. I only noticed it when I went to clean off dust and the edge caught my nail. This one wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my mother. I stood there for a long time, holding it. My breath caught. When she got home that evening, I handed it to her. She froze. Then, slowly, she opened it. Sat down at the kitchen table. Read in silence. A few minutes passed before she looked up at me, eyes glistening, but steady. "I want to read it to you," she said. I sat beside her. She cleared her throat. "Susan, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. I'm sorry. I promised I would, and this is the one promise I won't keep. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to tell Layla that silence is not surrender. That staying quiet isn't the same as being weak. It's how people like us survive long enough to speak when it counts. I need her to know she's not just my daughter. She's my echo, my continuation, my chance to do better through her. And if the world turns against her because of where I was born, or what I did in uniform, remind her, I didn't fight to be right. I fought to protect the ones who couldn't fight for themselves, including her. Tell her not to hate, even if she's mocked, or silenced, or labeled. Tell her to rise, because the truth always stands up in the end. And if she ever finds the courage to tell my story, then I'll know I did something right. I love you both. I'll be listening. Aaron." My mother didn't speak for a while after that. Neither did I. We just sat there, holding the letter between us, like it was a thread stitching our hearts back together. The next day, I brought the original box, the one with both letters, to school. Miss Carter was waiting for me in the library. She didn't ask what was in it. She just pointed to the small display shelf she'd set aside by the entrance. "I thought maybe," she said, "it's time more students learned about courage that doesn't come from textbooks." We arranged everything carefully. The medal, a printed photo of my father, a copy of the article about the evacuation, and next to it, a typed version of his letter framed. Students stopped to read it between classes. Some stood there longer than others. A few left sticky notes with messages like, "Thank you for reminding me not to judge." I cried reading this. My uncle served too. "I'm sorry for ever being silent when I saw people treating others like you were treated." It wasn't a statue. It wasn't a movie. It was just a shelf in a high school library. But for me, it was a memorial. A quiet rebellion against erasure. A space for truth to breathe. Later that week, Daniel, my cousin, invited me to speak at his synagogue's youth group. "They've been talking a lot about identity," he said, "and what it means to hold grief and pride at the same time. I think you could help." I agreed. Standing there, in front of kids who didn't look like me, didn't know me, and yet listened with open hearts, I realized something. My story was no longer just mine. It had become something larger, something useful. And for the first time, I felt the burden of it lighten, not disappear, but shift. Because when you carry something long enough, and then finally set it down, not to forget, but to share, it becomes less of a weight and more of a legacy. I went home that night and pulled out my journal. I wrote a single sentence on a clean page. He was never gone. I just hadn't heard myself clearly enough to realize he was still speaking through me. And I smiled, because I knew I hadn't just survived the silence. I had rewritten it. Spring came early that year. By late March, the trees outside Jefferson High were already dusted in pink and white. Everything felt new, soft, like the world had decided it was safe to bloom again. So had I. Hero Week had long passed. The media attention had faded. The YouTube clip had stopped climbing. Even the memorial shelf in the library now blended in like it had always been there. But something in me had changed quietly, permanently. I had stopped bracing for judgment, stopped shrinking in the hallways, stopped whispering my father's name like it was a wound. Now I said it with full breath, full heart, full clarity. In April, our school held a community assembly, something we rarely did unless a sports team won something big. But this time, it wasn't about victory. It was about legacy. They invited local veterans. Students performed music. And then, without warning, the principal called my name. I froze. He smiled from the podium. "Layla Bennett, please come up." We have something for you." My leg shook as I walked up, unsure of what was happening. He reached behind the podium and lifted a plaque, wooden, dark-stained, engraved in silver, in honor of Captain Aaron M. Bennett, for valor, humanity, and the daughter who refused to let the truth be forgotten. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, I was, but because something else took its place. Peace. I stood there as students clapped, as Ms. Carter dabbed her eyes, as my mom placed her hand over her heart. And I thought, this is what healing sounds like. After the assembly, a freshman girl stopped me by the vending machines. She looked nervous, holding a notebook tight to her chest. "Hi," she said. I just wanted to say thank you. For everything. My dad's in the Navy. I used to be scared to tell people that. Now I'm not." I smiled. "Your story matters too." She nodded quickly and hurried off. Cheeks red. That moment stuck with me longer than the applause. Because in the end, it was never about going viral, or plaques, or speeches. It was about giving someone else permission to stand up, simply by standing up first. One evening in May, I sat on the back porch with my mom. The sky was the color of worn denim, and cicadas hummed like background music. She was drinking chamomile tea. I had lemonade. For a while, we didn't talk. Then she turned to me and said, "Do you think your dad knew what kind of impact his letters would have?" I smiled. "No, I think he hoped, but I think he would have been surprised." She nodded, then added, "You know? You never asked why he left 2 letters." I blinked. "Why?" She looked away for a moment, then back. "Because he knew you'd find yours first. But he also knew you wouldn't open it unless something cracked you open. He wanted me to hold that space until you were ready." My throat tightened. "He trusted you," she said softly, "even before you knew how to trust yourself." Summer came. College brochures started arriving in the mail, even though I was only a junior. Some were from D.C. One had a full-ride application for a program in public policy and international relations. Ms. Carter had submitted my name. I hadn't decided yet, but for the first time, the future didn't scare me. It felt like possibility, like a place where I could take all of this, the pain, the truth, the voice I'd found, and do something useful with it. Not just tell stories, but help protect them, honor them, give them space, like someone once did for mine. On the last day of school, I went back to the library one more time. The shelf was still there, the letter still framed, but I added one more thing, a new note, tucked in the corner. It read, "To the next student who feels like their silence is being mistaken for weakness, this is your reminder, you are not alone. Speak when you're ready. The world needs your story." Then I walked out, not with fear, not with shame, but with something stronger than both, with purpose. Sometimes, the loudest victories are not the ones shouted from rooftops, but the ones whispered in a quiet room, written in a folded letter, or carried in a steady breath. You don't have to scream to be heard. You just have to know what your voice is worth and choose when to use it. Because the truth doesn't need to be loud to be unforgettable. It just needs someone brave enough to carry it forward.